last week we spoke to Kenzo Shibata. He's a high school teacher, a member of the executive board of the Chicago Teachers Union, a delegate in the Chicago Teachers Union House of Delegates. And we went a little bit longer, so if you just listened to us on the radio, we actually went a little bit over, went into what we call overtime online, and you can see our full conversation with him on our YouTube channel or in our podcast. And we love teachers, we love unions, and so when this came across my Twitter feed, it kind of it was incredibly frustrating to me. And so the folks that listen to us online, you're going to know who this guy is. Folks that listen to us on the radio, you're not going to know who this guy is. But it's okay because he says a lot of things that a lot of people say. So we can, even though you don't know who it is, we'll be able to attack. We'll be able to attack the ideas, and you'll get the gist. Okay. So Jimmy Dore is an internet politics guy, and so. Let's just jump right into it. I don't think that Adam has heard it, so we'll be able to kind of get his live takes. Let's go ahead and play that clip really quick.
Sure, and as I'm queuing that up, I do want to mention I greatly apologize, Jacob. I think you were muted for the first few seconds back. So, as always, technical problems can be blamed on me, Adam. Complaints about such technical problems can be forwarded to you, Jacob. Anyone who has complaints, share them with Jacob. He'd love to hear them.
I do.
But it is my fault. I will gladly take the blame for that. So, without further ado, let's listen to this moron, Jimmy Dore.
There's a big debate about whether they should open the schools because of COVID and because Omicron is so much more contagious. Omicron, the symptoms of Omicron are very mild, and they're like a cold. And a lot of people are saying that's good because that signals the end of the pandemic, because now we're going to become endemic, and now it will just circulate, and the symptoms that it will present with are those of a cold. Even though it's not, it's the Omicron cold. So
okay, let's pause it right there. Don't change the scene. I'm just going to address this really quick. He says that he calls it an Omicron cold, and he mentions that people are getting happy about this because it's more mild. It might signal the end of the pandemic. It might become endemic, and that's true enough, right? And we spoke to Dr. Mark-Elaine Derry about the coronavirus, about the pandemic, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. It was like New Year's or something when we spoke to him. You can hear our conversation there, full conversation with him on YouTube, our podcast as well. And he said a similar thing. Yes, the Omicron variant is more mild, and hopefully, crossing our fingers here, this will signal a trend in the coronavirus to become more and more mild. Because generally speaking, when we have a virus or when we have a cold, he says, it will become more and more mild because the goal of an organism is to live, right? And so if you're too virulent, if you're too deadly, you're going to kill your host. You're not going to be able to spread as much. You're not going to be able to live as long. You're not going to be able to replicate. And so it's generally the path is that it becomes more mild, and so, but we haven't seen that so far with the coronavirus. We've actually seen with each variant, it has become more and more transmissible and more virulent, more and more deadly, which is scary. It's very scary. But Omicron is the first variant that has become more transmissible, yes, but less virulent, less deadly. So the hope is, it's just a hope at this point, a hope based in like what usually happens, but it's a hope that it will continue to become less virulent, and that it will signal an end to the pandemic. It will signal that this will become endemic, and it will cycle through the population like the 1918 Spanish flu, because anytime you get a flu, you actually still get a variant of the Spanish flu because it got less and less virulent, less and less deadly, okay? But we're not there yet.
Yeah, there's some promising signs out of Africa and other places where Omicron, hit first, and that's good.
Right.
But there's still a lot up in the air, and there's still, of course, the risk
it's not
that there's more variants that are worse.
It's not a cold yet, okay? Like maybe, hopefully it will, but the Omicron variant is not a cold, okay? So let's talk about the cold. Let's talk about the flu. The record flu season in the last 10 years, and I only know 10 years because I just checked 10 years. I thought 10 years was a good time to check, okay? I don't know, whatever. But the last 10 years, the record flu season was 2017 to 2018. There were 61,000 deaths over 19 weeks. That averages to a daily death count of 460-ish. Where are we right now? Yesterday, the 7-day average was 1,912 people dying per day. That's the 7-day average. For the entirety of the pandemic, that's 4 times more than the record flu season of the last 10 years. And in fact, over the entirety of the pandemic, from April 2020 until now, there have only been 8 weeks where the daily death count was less than the record flu season from the last decade. That means every week for the last year and a half, we have had more people dying per day than during than the death rate from the most deadly flu in the last 10 years. And that flu season was only 19 weeks, which was a long flu season. We're talking about 80 weeks where we're seeing death rates exceed that. Okay, so look, Omicron, potentially a good signal. Is it the flu yet? Is it the cold yet? No.
And there's the long-term health effects, and a couple people in the chat have brought that up, and I'm glad they did, because that's also a distinction there. Not only is comparing it to the flu, a pretty flimsy comparison, but the long-term effects, of which we aren't entirely sure about right now. That's also a major difference there.
Yeah, so let's continue.
So everybody in their pants about kids having to go to school are just repeating propaganda, some big pharma-funded establishment news. Congratulations. Do you know the damage?
All right, that's basically all that I wanted to listen to, because here he's talking about they're fear-mongered by the establishment. Like, who is he talking about? The establishment. The establishment is not on the side of teachers. The establishment is not on the side of the Chicago Teachers Union. I mean, he's taking the side of such anti-establishment figures as Joe Biden, Jen Psaki, Lori Lightfoot, Ben Shapiro. Yeah, this is a really rowdy, progressive crowd that we've got, anti-establishment crowd. These people hate the establishment. These people hate capitalism. These people hate the status quo. They love it when people upend it. And totally, that's the crowd that he's hanging out with now. And this is all brought about. All these people, Morning Joe, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're all attacking the teachers right now, the Chicago Teachers Union. The ire of the entire United States is being put on the Chicago Teachers Union. And for what exactly? Let's review. Again, we spoke to Kenzo Shibata about this. You can go and hear the full conversation if you'd like. Let's review what is actually happening in the real world across the United States and in Chicago. The Chicago Teachers Union democratically voted. This was not a top-down dictate from the leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union. This was a democratic vote by the rank-and-file teachers to opt to go remote during the largest caseload of the coronavirus that we've seen to date. We are either approaching record hospitalizations or we're near or we've already passed record hospitalizations. They opted to go remote for the first time this year, I think, for the first time the whole school year, until some new safety measures were put in place. That's not crazy. And what were the safety measures? Maybe you think, oh, well, I bet the safety measure was something like building new school buildings. No. Here were the safety measures they wanted. They wanted enforceable metrics to shift school to remote. Okay, we've invested with the American Rescue Plan. We have invested funds to allow schools to go remote temporarily. We should make use of those, especially while we are still hopefully coming to the end of the pandemic, but we're still in the pandemic. We can shift to remote when we have surges like this for a couple of weeks. We should have enforceable metrics to shift school to remote, okay? Doesn't lay out what the metrics should be, just says we need enforceable metrics. That sounds reasonable. Real contact tracing, that sounds reasonable. We should be told when we've been exposed, okay? That's not going to take a whole lot of money. And better vaccine access. Well, vaccines are free, so we just have to set the vaccines up and allow and say that schools should be vaccine sites. We should have vaccination on school grounds. It's not crazy. High quality masks for both students and staff. Here's the crazy thing. Chicago Public Schools was rejecting help from the state that was meant to keep their children safe, rejecting funding from the state to purchase masks, to purchase N95 and KN95 masks. So just stop, just accept money, okay? That's not crazy. Accept money. Like, let people give you money. Okay, that doesn't seem difficult. And have either temporary remote learning or proper testing. And here it's important to know that the mayor's daughter in her fancy-ass private school was remote learning during this whole time because of the coronavirus wave, and implement a proper testing regime. That's like, this is not crazy stuff. That's what they asked for, and they were able to come to an agreement with Chicago Public Schools, and they're back in person now. Okay, so they did, and they opted to, and here's the crazy thing, they opted to go to remote learning, and what did the Chicago Public Schools do? They just canceled school. Like, all these people attacking the teachers for saying we want to teach safely for a moment while we get our bearings after the holiday. We want to take some time to get our bearings, teach remotely for a couple of weeks, or maybe for a week, or maybe for a few days while we implement some new safety measures. And everybody's attacking the teachers. Nobody is attacking the public school system, which just canceled school, but as just pitching a fit. I mean, even if you want to say that the teachers were totally in the wrong to do this, I don't think they were. I think it's a reasonable thing that they asked for, and it's a reasonable thing that they did. But even if you say that, Chicago Public Schools was doubly in the wrong, because if you're actually concerned about teachers educating students, if you're actually concerned about students getting that education, you would want them to get some form of education rather than nothing. That's what they got. Right.
The school system locked out the teachers from their virtual learning courses and platforms. Right. Because the mayor and what they called their school CEO, which is, essentially their superintendent, but I think the name says it all, really. Yeah. The CEO and the mayor decided, well, this is an illegal strike you guys are doing. This is an illegal work action, which, right. We'll see what side the law comes on that, but that's really irrelevant to the matter. Because they were all pissy about it, they decided, right. Well, we'll show you. You want to do remote learning, well, we'll just shut it off. So where you physically cannot get in on your computer to deliver remote instruction.
Yeah, we care
now,
so
how is
much.
That good for the kids?
We care so much about our students learning that we're just going to not allow them to learn at all for a week. Yeah, that's totally, you care so much about their education. Give me a break. Give me a break. And this is a guy who's supposed to be, like I said, he postures as like, oh, I'm the real progressive. I'm the real progressive. I'm the guy who is actually for progressive values. I'm the guy who's actually for workers. And here he's going out of his way to deflect blame from the boss. I mean, why were these things not implemented already? Is one. I mean, these are things that the Chicago Teachers Union has been asking for basically since the pandemic began. If Chicago Public Schools didn't want to have to go through this ad hoc stuff, they could have just said we're going to do this at the beginning so that you don't have a reason to take these ad hoc work actions. Everybody knows what's going to happen. But they didn't. He's going out of his way to deflect blame from the boss, from politicians. Who's the politician here? It's Lori Lightfoot. It's not the teachers. Going out of his way to deflect blame from politicians, from the government, from the establishment onto rank and file working people, and saying that he's anti-establishment, and saying that he's progressive, and that he's pro-worker. Give me a break. Give me a break.
But like I said earlier, I mean, that's what you see a lot of times in the kind of liberal commentary sphere.
Right.
When push comes to shove, you know, and union issues are actually on the table and in the popular consciousness, often you get to see their real values. And those who crap on teachers and teachers' unions, you know, that's really an indication of where their values lie. As the old song goes, whose side are you on?
Yeah. You can't be pro-union if you're anti-teachers union.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.